What would you have said if 3 years ago I told you in 2021 the Texas House Speaker would sign arrest warrants for 52 Democrats who fled the state to block voter reform legislation? Would you have believed me? I don't think people would have, for the most part. I mean, maybe some people would say, it's entirely possible, but I honestly think people would not believe me. I remember, based on everything we were seeing back in 2018 and 2017, talking to people about the bifurcation in this country, and they kept saying it would never reach this level. Never. Ted Cruz came out and said that there's clear legal authority to arrest these Democrats. PolitiFact says false. He's wrong. The amazing thing is Ted Cruz is a Texas senator and a lawyer. So who are you going to choose to trust? It doesn't matter, though. PolitiFact clearly falls on one side of the political bifurcation and Ted Cruz on the other. So naturally, you have one outlet saying they have no legal authority to do this. You have Ted Cruz saying clearly they do. It doesn't matter if they do or don't. This is the point, that people on the right, or whatever you want to call it in the culture war, are going to look and say, we have the right and the means to do it, so we will. And people on the left will say, no, you don't. And they just choose not to agree. That's it. Now, I know. You may say, Tim, Ted Cruz clearly is in the right. I mean, he's from Texas. He's a lawyer. PolitiFact, what do they know? I agree with you. I'm just saying that right now, the response from people on the left is that we've got one tweet. Let me just show you the tweet. Let me show you the tweet. The Republican Party is no longer hiding it. They are a full-blown authoritarian movement that must be stopped. Where do you think we go from here? Where do you think this leads to? You've got mandatory vaccination that people are rejecting. You've got Joe Biden speaking to only half the country. And that's another point I made that I'll reiterate. When Joe Biden comes out and says we got to do these restrictions and lockdowns, when the CDC says we got to do masks or otherwise, they're not talking to red states. The red states, for the most part, many of them, have already long since ended these restrictions and ignored this. The country is bifurcating, or already is, and it's reaching the highest levels of government. Now, if you're not familiar with what's going on, the quick gist of the story is that in Texas, you need a quorum in order to pass legislation. The Republicans want to pass voter reform, which doesn't even take away. So let me slow down. Because of the pandemic, a whole bunch of special provisions were enacted that made it easier to vote. Very, very easy. But it also reduced security in a lot of ways. Republicans say, let's walk that back only a little bit, not even completely. And the Democrats are saying that is fascism, and they refuse. So Democrats have fled the state, 52, I believe, in an effort to block quorum so the legislation cannot be passed. Republicans keep now having special sessions because with the Democrats not there, they can't do it. So the Republicans are calling for them to be arrested. Now, what this ultimately means is that the Democrats, if they should return to Texas, will be arrested and brought to the legislative chamber, and the session will take place. I'm not sure there will be any harsh criminal penalties or anything like that, but they can be arrested. The interesting thing is that the Supreme Court, also, I should say, in regards to what NPR is saying, PolitiFact is saying versus Ted Cruz, is that the Texas Supreme Court sided with Ted Cruz. They can be arrested. So we've got some pretty big developments. This, to me, suggests, I don't know, have we crossed the Rubicon? Have we come to this point where there is no reconciliation? The establishment Democrat types. I exclude the general leftists from this to a certain degree because they're talking about some completely other things, but there is an overlap when you get people like Cori Bush and AOC. But the establishment Democrats are gung-ho fascists. No joke. I don't use that word lightly. The Democratic establishment are fascists. Oh, I know. I can already hear the left. No, let me explain. When you have the lucrative merger between corporation and state, the use of private institutions by the government to achieve ends such as violating civil rights, then that's at least Mussolini's fascism. And I mean, he would know, wouldn't he? Others say that fascism is traditionalist authoritarian nationalism, and maybe I think the bigger concern is, call it whatever you want, the lucrative merger between corporation and state. That's what we are seeing right now. That's what the Democratic establishment supports. And that should be scary to everybody. Here's a story from NPR. Remember when protesting Texas House Democrats abandoned the state capitol, then fled the state to Washington, D.C. to block proposed voting restrictions during a special session? Well, major developments late Tuesday mean they might not be able to escape the long arm of the law for much longer. This is awful writing, by the way. Republican House Speaker Dade Phelan signed off on dozens of civil arrest warrants for Democrats late Tuesday, after a majority of the remaining representatives in the chamber voted to authorize the step, the Dallas Morning News first reported. The move came hours after a ruling by the all-Republican state Supreme Court, you see how they do this, that said law enforcement can round up rogue legislators and bring them back to the state capitol's House chambers. The state Supreme Court's decision undid an earlier lower court ruling that said lawmakers could not be arrested. The 52 warrants seeking the arrest of the fugitive Democrats will be delivered to House Sergeant-at-Arms on Wednesday, according to Phelan's spokesman Enrique Marquez, who spoke to the Dallas Morning News. Critically, it wouldn't take many arrests for the House to return to business, the newspaper reported. A quorum is reached when 2/3 of the 150 members are in the chamber. Since Monday, 96 House members have recorded themselves as present, leaving it just 4 votes short of a quorum. On Monday, State Rep Gina Hinojosa called out Democrats that had returned to the chamber and urged her party colleagues still absent to stay away. Quorum is still not met. Praying no other Democrats willingly go to the floor, she tweeted. If the Democrats are successful in denying the House its quorum, Republicans could be forced to end their second 30-day special session without voting on any bills. And what would have to happen is the Democrats could just never return. That's basically what they got to do. I think there should be a provision, and y'all in Texas got to figure this one out, for dereliction of duty. If Democrats flee the state and are not there to do their jobs, maybe like after 3 missed sessions, then you don't need them for quorum and they get marked off. Maybe the places where they are representing can have a special election to send somebody else. The protracted battle started when Democrats fled the state. This we know. They say Democrats and voting rights. Oh, okay, I got to read this one. They say this. It started to deny the chamber a quorum that would allow the legislature the ability to vote on Senate Bill 7. The proposal, which had appeared poised for passage, would cut back polling hours and reduce access to mail-in voting. You see, what happened was, as I said, the Republicans and everybody gave all of these special benefits because of COVID. Now the Republicans are saying it's time to shut off the valve. They're like, no, how could you? You're voter suppressing. Democrats and voting rights advocates say those and other provisions of the bill would make voting more difficult in Texas and could disproportionately burden people of color. Isn't that what they always do? Texas Republicans maintain the bill is meant to reinforce election integrity, but there's been no evidence of significant voter fraud in the state or elsewhere. That I love. Locking the door is making it harder for us to get in the house. And what's the point of putting locks on the door when there's no evidence anybody broke in? Seriously, that's your argument? We have security because we don't want people to break in. Think about the logical just fallacy, the ignorance. These are the people who are just like, what do you need a fire extinguisher for? Your house isn't on fire. Like, dude, we put the fire extinguisher there in the event there's a fire. We want to prevent the fire. Why are you even installing sprinklers in this building? There's no fire. There's no evidence of fire in the building. Dude, do you get it? They're trying to not allow these things to happen. And the funny thing is that they always come out and say, but there's no evidence that voter fraud occurs anywhere, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well then, that's still like no one's ever broken into my house. Therefore, I should not have any locks on the windows. There's very little evidence that in this area where I live, people will break into my house. Man, why do I have a security system? Because it can happen. It's a weird and stupid argument. No security because it hasn't happened yet. So what? We remove security from our elections until something bad happens? That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. Well, here we go, man. This is interesting. We have an update this morning. Texas Supreme Court temporarily blocks judge's order that prevented arrest of quorum-busting Texas Democrats. The Texas Supreme Court has temporarily blocked a state district judge's temporary restraining order that had prevented the arrest of Texas House Democrats who left the state last month in an attempt to stop the passage of restricted voting bills. The ruling means that many of the Democratic lawmakers who returned to Texas but continue to break quorum during the second session could now be at risk for arrest after state House Republicans voted later Tuesday to direct the Sergeant-at-Arms to compel attendance under warrant of arrest if necessary. But the 80-12 vote came just hours after the Texas Supreme Court ruling and was mostly along party lines, with one House Republican voting against the motion. I'll tell you what's worrying to me about all this. It's this statement right here. Midas touch. They're a Democrat thing. They're Act Blue, I guess. I don't know. They say the Republican Party is no longer hiding it. They are a full-blown authoritarian movement that must be stopped. There you go. This is where do we go from here? In 2018, we weren't seeing stuff like this. In fact, in 2018, before the midterms, the Republicans were agreeing with Democrats on Russiagate. What losers. They were, though. I mean, you had a lot of Republicans saying like, well, we got to investigate this and we're in it because it's the uniparty. Now we're seeing something interesting. There is, I guess, the populist uprising, which includes some leftists and many of the Trump supporters and right-wing populists, libertarians and ANCAPs and things like that. The problem with the populist left is that they too often just defend the Democrats for tribal reasons, which is insane because the Democratic establishment in power right now is the uniparty, which many of us have long been complaining about. The Republican establishment and Democratic establishment, basically the same thing. And now you have something different, I guess, a populist uprising. I think the leftists need to wake up to this. The problem is you have many prominent faux progressive shills pretending to oppose the establishment, but just suckling the teat and taking all that money. From the Texas Tribune. Texas Supreme Court denies Democrats' request to overturn Governor Greg Abbott's veto of legislature's funding. Abbott vetoed a section of the state budget that funds the legislature, including salaries and benefits of 2,100 employees, as punishment for House Democrats' May walkout to prevent passage of a controversial voting bill. I don't know if it's fair to say punishment. It may be so that they're forced to come back and vote. That could be it. But not only are they facing arrest, they're facing not getting paid. So there you go. Texas ain't playing around. They say Abbott vetoed the funding in June after House Democrats walked out during the final days of the regular session in May, killing two of his priority bills on elections and changing the state's bail system. Abbott then brought the legislature back for a special session. This we know. Democrats challenged Abbott's veto in court, saying it stripped their power as co-equal branch of government. But the Texas Supreme Court on Monday sided with Abbott on his veto that will effectively defund the Texas legislature, its staffers, and legislative agencies later this year. Y'all better get in and make that vote. Otherwise, you're not getting paid. So potential arrest, no paychecks. They're civil arrests. I'm not going to pretend like this is them throwing their political opponents in prison or anything like that. But boy, are we walking a dangerous line. We're getting close to that line, man. Remember in 2015 and 16, there's a really funny moment where Hillary Clinton said something like, well, you know, it's a good thing you're not president then. And then Trump goes, because you'd be in jail. And then everyone's like, woo, and they're all clapping and cheering. The media was like, how dangerous is it that Trump is threatening to imprison his political rivals? Fascism, despotism. We are increasingly worried about Trump's rhetoric. Yeah, we don't want to get into that space where we're like, we'll arrest our political rivals. Sure, we're there, right? They warned us. The media was screaming how dangerous this was. Well, here we are. The funny thing is, I mean, still, it is the Republicans threatening to or actually calling for and issuing warrants for the arrest of the Democrats. They're not throwing them in jail, though. But is this line not being crossed? Are we now at the point where Republicans will sign an arrest warrant for a Democrat? Whatever that ends up meaning in the long run, I honestly don't know. Maybe, as I often say, maybe everything just stops right now. Maybe right now is the time the Democrats walk in, they walk up to the Republicans, shake their hand, pat them on the shoulder and say, you know what, we were wrong and we need compromise. And the Republican wipes a tear from his eye and says, I've just been waiting for so long for the opportunity to shake your hand and compromise on these policy positions. And then they hug and then people pop champagne and they celebrate good times. Maybe Joe Biden comes out and says, I want to extend an olive branch to all the Trump supporters. I'm here for you and we're going to do right by you. And then maybe, a prominent populist Trump supporter, Marjorie Taylor Greene, comes out and says, I'm here to work with Biden. And the media establishment says, Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing an amazing job reaching out that olive branch to Joe Biden. Never gonna happen. Okay, you know what? I should never say never. I suppose it could happen. I just don't see it. Every step of the way in the escalation in our conflict, I have always said, maybe this is it. People are going to come to their senses and say, we got to stop fighting. We got to figure this one out. I'd appreciate that. One of the reasons we had Charlie Kirk and Vosh on the show at the same time is to show that, we probably agree on a lot of things that we should talk about. And then maybe we can solve those problems and work in that direction. It's too hard to do, though, honestly. And people are more obsessed with tribalistically hating the other, believing whatever fake garbage they can from the media smear machine because they're just hateful people. Is any of this really about policy? I mean, maybe. But for the most part, you see people on Twitter saying the Republicans must be ended because it's tribalism. I think ultimately the tribalism is rooted in whether or not you believe the media, because as you've seen, I've shown you with the civics polling, for some reason, independent voters and Republican voters think the economy is doing very bad or fairly bad. And Democrats, for some reason, believe that the economy is doing fairly good. Now, what's up with that? Because by any objective measure, the economy is not doing well. We had even NBC coming out saying vaccine mandates are going to hurt corporations because people are going to quit at a time when there's already a labor shortage and we have more job openings than people available to work. So don't tell me the economy is good. These people live in some crazy, nightmarish, twisted reality. And you know what, man? I don't know if it's always been this way. Maybe it has. Because it used to be, 3 channels, 3 newspapers or whatever. Maybe it was always garbled nonsense BS. Maybe only now we've been able to shatter the veil and see on the other side of what's been happening. Maybe it's new. Maybe it's the internet. Or maybe we've always had a good glimpse of reality to a certain degree. We've had journalists willing to challenge powerful interests, even at risk of going to prison. We've had people like Julian Assange publishing the things the government doesn't want to be published, and he was a hero to the left. What's happening now with the Democratic Party is new. The expansion of a cult tribalist dogma. And I'm telling you, look, you can say that the Republicans were moral authoritarians in the past, and perhaps many of them were. You still had people like Tipper Gore who were, very moral authoritarian. The point is, I think we used to actually have a touch of reality on all sides. Republicans and Democrats agreed on a lot of things, and they got a lot of things wrong. But for the most part, that's why we had people in America not too dissimilar. If you look at the Pew Research data, we can see that people were very close to each other in opinion. Republicans and Democrats overlapped substantially. Now, what do we have? Democratic voters believe insane things. They'll believe 2 + 2 = 5. You think I'm joking. Now, I know maybe many of the Democratic voters don't actually believe this stuff, but when you look at the polling data and you see that something, I think it's the plurality, like of the high 48% or whatever of Democrats think the economy is good, what is going on in their brains that they have not actually gone to the store and looked at prices, that they're not looking at the consumer price index. You know why? Because they go to the TV and the TV's like, everything's better than ever. You are happy all of the time. And they're like, yes, I am happy. Things are good. And then regular people, discerning people, people who are actually reading the news are going, oh, that's weird. Food prices are skyrocketing. Oh, that's weird. Biden is warning about rising energy costs. Biden of all people. How is that overlooked by these people in the Democratic Party? The media is reporting it. I'm sitting here reading it to you. Let me show you. There are people who choose what to believe. Fox News. Ted Cruz slams PolitiFact false rating over absent Texas Democrats after state Supreme Court ruling. Texas House Speaker issued civil arrest warrants. We know this. Check this out. From PolitiFact. Ted Cruz in an interview said, there is clear legal authority to handcuff and put in leg irons legislators that are trying to stop the legislature from being able to do business. False, they said. What's really amazing is that PolitiFact says, false. It's not true. There's no legal authority to do this. And the Texas Supreme Court is like, there is indeed legal authority to arrest the Democrats. Now, a district judge did prevent this, but the Supreme Court said, they can do it. So what's PolitiFact on about? What gives them the authority to assert something is not correct? The funny thing is Ted Cruz is a Texas senator who is a lawyer. Amazing, isn't it? What do they say? What does arrest mean? According to Sandra Thompson, a University of Houston law professor and director of the Criminal Justice Institute, the word arrest in the context of the House rules doesn't grant officers an automatic right to use restraints or unreasonable levels of force. You see, you have the right to use the level of force appropriate to arrest someone. That means you could see them if imagine this. Okay. Agents of the state are seeing the Democrats deboarding a plane and they say, sir, you're under arrest. Come with us. And then the Democrat says, no. Well, then you're resisting arrest. And when you're resisting arrest, you're committing a crime. If you're committing a crime of resisting arrest, the police can then use reasonable force to restrain you. If you then still continue to resist, they can escalate the amount of force they use to the point of even tasing some of these people. Here's what I'm trying to get to. In the context, arrest doesn't give them the authority. Here's what they say, quote, in a situation like this, they don't even have a warrant for a criminal arrest, Thompson said. I think we really need to be thinking about this more in terms of an escort than trying to analogize it as a criminal situation. Now the warrants have been issued. You see, PolitiFact is wrong. They were wrong the whole time. And they think, and they've done this a lot, that fact-checking is getting an opinion from somebody. That is not fact-checking. Calling up somebody and being like, what's your opinion on the law? This is what's really funny about like all the election stuff last year. I had a smear piece say that although I didn't promote the fraud conspiracies, I entertained fringe legal theories. Yes, because we have to see how the courts decide. Many things are possible in the realm of law. You know what the problem with many of these Democrat voter types is that they think they live in a box. And the box has defined rules, and the rules are perfect. I think that we live in a world of men. I don't mean males. I mean a world of humans. And human word is fallible. What does that mean? You can have, how about this? We have speed limit signs everywhere. Don't go faster than 55. And everyone does. Everyone all the time is speeding at least 5 over. That's what they say, right? Don't speed, by the way. And so we know there's a rule. We know we're not supposed to do it, but everyone literally just does it anyway. Why would I then not entertain the possibility that human beings can just do stuff? It's amazing, right? The world they live in. If we outlaw guns, then gun crime will go down. And I'm kind of like, criminals break the law. They have no respect for it. So your ideas make no sense. But these people, they think they're living in a computer program. They think legislation and law and precedent literally means this can never happen. Courts interpret things differently all the time. And you know what? I got to be honest. Many Republicans do this too. When I'm like, you should sue them for defamation. You can't do it because these standards. And I'm like, if you don't try, the precedent will not change. Take it to the Supreme Court to get new precedent. Human beings have to weigh in on these things. What does arrest mean? It means stop. That's what it means. It means to prevent someone from moving and to control their movement. And they say, well, there's no warrants. Our ruling. Cruz said there's clear legal authority to handcuff and put in leg irons. The Texas House rule states that absent lawmakers can be sent for and arrested wherever they may be found. But because absent lawmakers aren't charged with the crime, it's unclear how the use of the word arrest should be interpreted in this context. This is because no Texas court has reviewed how the provision is to be enforced. Thus, there is no legal clarity. We rate this claim false. Editor's note, the story has been updated to include comments from Cruz's office. Well, they're trying to argue the most semantic of semantics. Well, what does arrest really mean? And can you really shackle somebody? I mean, yes. There's no legal clarity, they say. Well, PolitiFact has just disproven their own claim. No legal clarity means, okay, all right, that's the funny point, because Ted Cruz said there's clear legal authority. There is. The Texas Supreme Court says these people can be arrested. But because they don't define what it means to civilly arrest somebody, PolitiFact is arguing that then Ted Cruz is wrong. No, I think if there's no legal clarity on what the arrest actually means, it means Ted Cruz is right. The authority to arrest them exists. Arrests involves restraint. Why wouldn't that be the case? Why would PolitiFact think that Ted Cruz, a lawyer and senator, is wrong in his opinion, but that some other expert is right in their opinion? And therein lies the main problem here. Ted Cruz gives his opinion, Professor gives their opinion, and PolitiFact says, we agree with this one because we chose to. You are morons, PolitiFact. And anybody who doesn't understand this is a moron. They live in a box. They think our experts are infallible, but Ted Cruz is not an expert. How about Ted Cruz is a lawyer and so are you? So how about the point is moot? The arrest warrants have been issued. Ultimately, here's the main point. I think the system is collapsing. The economy is in shambles. Maybe I'll talk about that in another segment. We got so much news, man. Prices are skyrocketing. Now the inflation's at its highest it's been since even before 2008. Like going back even further, was it 5.4 or something? I don't know. I got to check. Wow. I remember when it hit 5% and they were like, this is bad. It's like 2008. And now it's higher. Again, I got to fact check that. I don't have those sources pulled up. So maybe that segment will be coming up soon. I'll leave it there. Next segment will be at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.